On today's Locked On Jayhawks, Lance Leipold in Kansas landed 5 transfer portal commits over the weekend. We break all down all their games and what they mean to KU football trying to return to a bowl game in 2025.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening? Derek Johnson here. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for making it your first listen every day. Thank you to everydayers catching each and every show. And we are anywhere you get your podcast. We are on YouTube, where you can like and subscribe. On today's edition of Locked On Jayhawks, we are breaking down KU football's 5 latest transfer portal commits. The way this is going for Lance Leipold, there might be 6 or 7 by the time you listen to this. Who knows? But a great start in the portal for Lance Leipold and company. We're going to break it down. They have 2 on defense, including a former top 50 recruit nationally, brought in a new receiver for Jalen Daniels to throw to, an offensive lineman to try to protect him, and a new kicker into the program officially. We'll break that all down on today's episode of the show, which is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com, and you can get started today. I feel like we always start with the offense. So today we're going to start with the defense, KU's 2 newest additions, which I think is fine because you're adding a Big 12 transfer. You're adding a transfer from Alabama who's a former top 50 recruit from the high school level. So let's get into that, and we'll get into the scouting reports of all the players and what it means for each position room. The first addition, and this was the first one that made it public and announced, Lyrik Rawls, which is a great name to begin with. If there's like a music company that can get him sponsored with some sort of NIL, great. He is a 6'1", 210-pound safety from Oklahoma State. So used to playing in the Big 12. He's originally from Marshall, Texas, visited Lawrence earlier last week, and was, I guess, blown away enough to commit to be a Jayhawk. He was rated as an 89 graded 3-star out of high school, which almost puts him at the 4-star level. Like once you're a 90, that becomes a 4-star. So about as high of a 3-star as you could be. Took a red shirt in 2021 in Stillwater. Then played 12 games in 2022. He started 3 games in 2023 and looked like he was on his way to having a breakout season, having his best season. And then he had an injury, missed the rest of the season. He played 12 games in 2024, where he was listed as a redshirt junior, but I do believe he will be able to get a medical redshirt for that 2023 season. So even though, again, the listing had him as a redshirt junior, I believe 2025 will be the first of what he can have 2 years at Kansas. He'll just have a decision to make after 2025. Before his career, 27 games played. You're talking 67 tackles, 2.5 TFLs, a sack, 6 pass deflections, 2 interceptions, a forced fumble. He had a 64.2 PFF grade this season in 220 snaps, which, that 60 to 69 range basically means you're that average level starter, which is, good enough. You're bringing in an average level starter from another conference. But I think there's, and that is helpful to have those types of players. But I think there's a reason you could expect even more. If you look at it from the perspective of he was having maybe his best season, the year before, and then he had the injury that caused him to miss the season, that means he was playing this year coming back from a season-ending injury the year prior, which means to me, I would think he's going to be even more comfortable in 2025, even though he'll be, learning a new scheme and everything, that I would expect plus another year. You expect growth from players at the collegiate level. He mostly played as a box safety, but a decent amount at free safety. He played some in the slot. Out of reference, what I think is interesting, if you look at the PFF grade, 64.2. Marvin Grant was a 65.1. I thought Marvin Grant was, solid this year, so you're around that. O.J. Burrows is 64.8. Taylor Davis was a 61.6. But here's what I find very interesting. Even though this guy could be used as kind of a box safety, I think at times Oklahoma State wanted to use him more as like a linebacker safety type. But he had a 69.7 coverage grade this season. O.J. Burrows had a 60.1 as a coverage grade as a safety. Marvin Grant was a 59.9, and Taylor Davis was a 54.6. So if you view that as gospel, and again, it's maybe less snaps than some of those guys, and it's only on 5 targets and 100 coverage snaps, but if that were the case, he would wind up being the best cover safety that KU has. And that was a bugaboo for this Kansas team this past season. Like, you had the corners on the outside, but you didn't always have the safety coverage and the linebacker coverage over the middle. And now you look at the safety room for KU, right? I think the idea here is that Lyrik Rawls is going to play the boundary safety, is what KU calls it, which is basically what I've always thought of as more of like the strong safety type, if you're more of a general term there. But maybe KU ends up playing DK McDonald a 3-safety lineup, right? And then you kind of have a box safety, a strong safety, which is, I guess, maybe a little further back of a box safety type. And then you have kind of a free safety in there too. And maybe because Rawls does have that coverage ability, maybe he can play some free safety, maybe he can play some box safety, maybe he can play some as the boundary safety. Maybe he's a little bit of everything, but he's going to get on the field, I think, at a good rate. You also have Taylor Davis coming back, who got a good amount of playing time as a redshirt freshman. I'd imagine he'll get a lot of playing time this year. Jalen Dye, Devin Dye, both back for the redshirt senior season. I think both of them were kind of dealing with injuries through the season, didn't perform maybe to the level that they were hoping for, but they had to deal with those injuries and maybe back for more. And then can a guy like Mason Ellis, who might be the best athlete in that room, can he get more playing time as a redshirt junior? Can Damani Maxson, after having a redshirt season, like he's somebody who can hit you, could he work his way into the rotation? You got a couple true freshmen coming in there too with Darian Jones and Brandon Schmelsley. But I think I look at it right now, and if I'm looking at it, okay, if there's going to be 3 safeties who are playing the most, my assumption at the moment would almost be Taylor Davis, Lyrik Rawls, and then one of the Dye brothers, with maybe the other one being, rotating in there between those. But then again, maybe like Devin Dye is the guy who plays the free safety the best, right? Like maybe all those other guys are more box safeties and boundary safeties. That makes that competition a little bit different. Okay, they also added to the corner room with Jahlil Hurley. And this is the biggest one if you're looking back to like high school recruiting rankings and maybe using that to indicate like who has the highest potential. And it's not like Jahlil Hurley is somebody who, was in college for 4 years and, hasn't played a ton despite being a highly recruited guy. He was a redshirt freshman this season and he didn't play a ton at Alabama. So Jahlil Hurley, he is a 6'2", 170 pound corner. I think PFF lists him at 185 pounds, but Alabama's website at 170 pounds. And came into Alabama as a top 50 recruit in the country. Again, this is not top 50 corner. This is not top 50 DB, top 50 overall player in the recruiting class, right? Those guys don't end up at KU very often. And then in the odd chance that they do, like DJ Warner, they ended up hitting the portal after a year, right? This is a very big get. And you're talking about with Jahlil Hurley. He's originally from Florence, Alabama. He was rated an 87 transfer by 24/7 Sports. So he redshirted his first year in Tuscaloosa. Then this season, he appeared in 3 games. It was only 19 snaps, Western Kentucky, the Missouri game, and the Mercer game. And in those 19 snaps, he graded out solid on PFF, 65.6 overall, 62.8 in coverage. He had 1 tackle on the season. He wasn't targeted in coverage. So it's a very small sample size. You can't really take away too much from it. But again, you look at a long, lengthy corner. Clearly, he's a good athlete if he's rated that high as a former high school recruit. This is somebody who I look at similar like when KU took Demarius McGee, who was a former highly recruited guy from LSU. We saw Demarius McGee a little bit this year. But the difference there is Demarius McGee is what, like 5'9", 5'10"? Jahlil Hurley is like 6'2". And also Demarius McGee, even though he's a highly recruited guy, is a top 200 recruit. Jahlil Hurley is a top 50 recruit, right? So I think this is a very big get. And the way that Kansas has, done a good job with that corner position, seeing Mello Dotson and Kobe Bryant, what they've done. Even in past iterations of coaching staffs, it always hasn't been pretty for the Kansas football program, but they've tended to develop corners at a pretty high rate. And he just adds to a really good corner room. Like, if I were projecting the starters right now, I'd probably go with Demarius McGee, having the veteran experience, and Jalen Todd. But who's going to be the third corner? Is it going to be Jameel Croft, who I think is very talented? He'll be a redshirt sophomore. Is it going to be Jahlil Hurley, who will be a redshirt sophomore as well? What about Jacoby Davis, Austin Alexander, Andre Gibson? You got Chris McCorkle coming in there as well. I think there's a real good opportunity for Hurley to compete. The way I view it, honestly, the guy I feel most confident in is going to be a starter next year is Jalen Todd. I think that those number 2 and number 3 corner positions, which number 3 is still going to get on the field a good amount, are really up for grabs. I think mostly probably between McGee, Hurley at this point, Croft, and then if there is a breakout from one of those other young guys, Davis, Alexander, Gibson. But, he could make an impact this year. He could make an impact down the road, because then even if Demarius McGee starts this year, he's a redshirt senior, so he'd be gone after the year. And then you're talking about a guy that you have 2 more seasons, even after 2025, and is a former highly touted guy. So Kansas continuing to make you feel good about the corner room for the future and kind of how it's all set up for them, even after Jordan Peterson left. All right, let's get on to the offensive additions for KU, offensive tackle and a receiver in Cam Pickett. We're going to discuss those next, what they mean to their position rooms on Locked On Jayhawks. This episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. All you got to do, visit FanDuel.com. You can join today. Just get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL and the Locked On Podcast Network. Continuing on our show, a little transfer portal chatter here. KU picking up 5 commits over the weekend, 2 on offense or 2 on defense and 1 on special teams. And again, by the time you listen to this, maybe it's even gone up. I'm recording this on Sunday night, and who knows, maybe there's an even later Sunday night one that we'll have to talk about on a later show this upcoming week. So offense, Cam Pickett. He is a receiver transfer from Ball State. That's kind of like with Kenny Pickett. I don't think there's any relation here. Nor it's like with a quarterback receiver. Do you want your last name being Pickett? Probably not. But anyway, this is a good receiver. He is a 6 foot, 194-pound receiver, redshirted in 2022 after joining Ball State. Did not play in 2023. According to Fog.net, 24/7 Sports, he is going to try to get a medical red shirt for that season. So theoretically, he was listed as a redshirt sophomore this past season. But if that gets cleared, he would really be a third-year freshman, which means he'll have 3 seasons with you if you're Kansas. He'll have 2025, 2026, and 2027 should he get the medical red shirt cleared. So this season, he had 49 catches for 528 yards and 2 touchdowns. He was also used as an all-purpose guy, 17 rushes for 170 yards, so really good in those situations with 2 more scores. If you look at all-purpose yards, so taking into account rushing, receiving, return yards, he had 828 all-purpose yards this season and ended up being 3rd team All-MAC. So this is a good receiver. The one maybe question here is how is it going to translate to the harder competition, obviously. He did have 2 games against Power 4 opponents, and they did not produce at a very high level. He played against Miami, which obviously was one of the best teams in the country, though the defense was a little bit suspect. And then he played against a Vanderbilt team, which was a solid Vanderbilt team. In the 2 games combined, he only had 4 catches for 48 yards. So that'll be something that he has to adjust to. But again, if you're talking about basically what was a freshman in one sense for Ball State, the fact that he produced and even had a couple catches in each game, and that he's going to continue to grow, continue to get better, continue to learn now in the Kansas offense, be with Jalen Daniels, like those are good things. So that'll be important. And when you look at the receiver room, like that is a very important position for Kansas to hit on in the transfer portal because there's a lot of opportunities there. When you lose LJ Arnold, Quentin Skinner, and Luke Grimm, that's a lot of snaps. That's a lot of production, not just this year, but over the past really 2-3 years if you're Kansas. And you have a lot of freshmen coming in with Jaden Nickens, Tate Nagy, Bryson Hayes, and Jackson Cook. But how much are those guys going to be ready to play right away? With Keaton Kubeka, he's been in the program a few years. Is he going to be ready to go? Right? It seems like the coaching staff likes him, but he hasn't made a bunch of catches in his career. Like we've seen very limited playing time for him. Doug Emilion's a guy that I've liked some flashes of, but again, we haven't seen a ton of it. So there's real opportunity for receivers to come in and get a big target share and produce at a very high level, but also to make an impact on this team. And I think you want to build a receiver room with guys who can do different things. And that's what I like here. So like Doug Emilion, I view as kind of like he's your slot receiver that can run good routes. He's got quick feet, stuff like that. Keaton Kubeka is more of your like outside receiver, who's kind of a big body guy. Like he can block on the outside. He can do a lot of different things for you. With Cam Pickett, he gives you an option of somebody who you can just get the ball in his hands, right? Like that's kind of what Kansas has been missing over the past couple of years. You had it a little bit with Trevor Wilson, but also there were other things that maybe kept Trevor Wilson off the field a little bit more. With Pickett, you have that all-purpose guy. You can give him a receiver screen. You can give him a jet sweep. You can give him a little slant and watch him run. He can play on the outside. He can play on the inside. So really like that addition, and I'm sure Jalen Daniels will too. The next addition on the offense is DeAndre Harper. He is a 6'6", 305-pound left tackle from Northwest Missouri State. I guess we don't know for sure he'll be a left tackle at Kansas, but that's what he was at Northwest Missouri State, which is a Division II out of the MIAA. Obviously, Kansas had some success going from Division II players. You had Shane Bumgardner, who was a rotational player this year. More success, obviously, with Dominic Pooney, with what he did on the offensive line. But with Harper, he is originally from Omaha, Nebraska. He was a second-team All-State pick at Omaha North High School. Ended up going to Northwest Missouri State, and he started at left tackle as a true freshman. Northwest Missouri State was 6-5. The MIAA is always really good at football. So honestly, just impressive to start as a true freshman there. So he'll be a true sophomore in 2025. And I think it gives you a lot of options if you're Kansas. If this kid performs and carries over his stuff right away, then you can be like, okay, because right now, if you're projecting the offensive line starters, you obviously, Bryce Foster at center, Kobe Baines at guard. Who's going to be the other guard? Is it going to be, Amir Herring? Is it going to be a DK Stearns? I think he can have another year. Is it going to be Nolan Gorchika, or is Gorchika going to be a tackle, right? Like, what are you going to do there? And then at the tackle spots, it's like, okay, I think it's going to be Calvin Clements. Who's going to be the other tackle? Will it be Gorchika? Or will it be like James Livingston? Or will it be somebody like this? There is enough opening that, he going to compete for being the other starting tackle. And if he ends up being good enough to be the starting tackle, transferring over right away, great. And you still could have 3 more years out of him. If he needs a year to develop and, it takes a little bit of time making that jump up and you're still only in your second year of college and you need to add weight and muscle, that's also great because he still has a red shirt available. You could red shirt him and then you still have 3 more seasons after that. Or if it's kind of an in-betweener, which maybe that would be the best situation for Kansas, that he's good enough to work his way onto the 2 deep and be the second string, left or right tackle. But you only want to make sure he gets in 4 games so he can both be on the 2 deep and be there if you need him, but also going to preserve that red shirt. Like, that's great too. And you're at a point now where you lost enough on the offensive line where you don't just need starting level offensive linemen. And to be clear, like, it's hard to know with there's not like PFF data, for instance, on Harper. Is he going to be good enough to come right away and play? Is he going to take some time to develop? Either way, you need more bodies in that room. You need more depth in that room. And the beauty of Harper is you're not only getting that, but you're also getting future play, right? In theory, even if he's not good enough to get on the field in year 1, you're getting multiple years out of it that he should be able to get on the field down the road. And again, if he does get on the field and he is good enough to do it right away, then even better. So, you still have to probably add a couple more offensive linemen and just get more bodies in there and more impact players. But I think a good start. And I was really impressed with some of the highlights I saw of DeAndre Harper. Again, it's going to be much better competition, but it doesn't mean players can't make that jump because we see it all the time from FCS players, from D2 players, that they're able to make that jump and still be productive players at the next level. Let's finish up. KU officially added a new kicker. This is Locked On Jayhawks. This episode of the show is brought to you, how about this, big time, college football playoff on TNT. It's that time of year. The college football playoff is back, and with the newly expanded 12-team format, it is guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever, bringing you all hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you love about college football. TNT Sports coverage of the college football playoff begins December 21st. That's upcoming this week. We got a Friday night game, starting with the college football playoff kickoff show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern. So you got Friday night action. The TNT action starts on Saturday with the first matchup, the Southern Methodist University Mustangs battling the Penn State and Indy Lions at noon. I'm super excited for that. Then you got the Clemson Tigers looking to upset the Texas Longhorns in a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern. Whoever wins has to wear the other team's shade of orange for the rest of eternity. I think that's how it works. Don't miss a moment of the action. Watch the college football playoff presented by Allstate live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. Thank you for joining us today on Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for making it your first listen. We will be back later in the week. We're going to have some basketball content. We're going to evaluate at this point the KU basketball positions compared to maybe preseason expectations. We're also going to get into our season-long KU football position evaluations and kind of look ahead to next year at each of those positions. And then we'll also have a KU Brown preview and some more content coming at you right here with Locked On Jayhawks. So make sure you subscribe to the show anywhere that you get your podcast. Okay, so KU, we brought this up on a recent episode, and again, thank you. If you're an everydayer who catches each and every show, then you already heard us talk a little bit about Laith Marjan, which I think is the way that you pronounce it. He is a kicker who spent a couple of years at East Carolina, transferred to South Alabama. Now he's transferring to KU. He will be a senior in his final season for KU, so it'll be a one-year thing, kind of like when KU brought on Seth Keller. And the thing with Marjan is he's got really good numbers, but it's not just really good numbers of, hitting a bunch of short kicks. He's got some distance to him. 16 of 17 on the year for South Alabama, 4 for 4 on kicks between 20 and 29, 6 for 6 on kicks between 30 and 39, 6 for 6 on kicks between 40 and 49. His lone miss came 50 plus. He had a long of 49. And that is so important because if you're talking about, I think there are times where Kansas maybe should be a little bit more aggressive on some fourth down tries, but they're typically not. Like you look at the ranks of where Kansas is compared to the other Big 12 teams in fourth down attempts over the last couple of years, like they're at the bottom. So if that's how you're going to play, if you are going to play a more conservative style, you better invest in a kicker, because if that's what you're going to do, you better deliver on those points. And so it makes sense to go out and prioritize a player like this, who, if he can have the same success he had last season and bring it over to KU, then you're going to have a weapon at the kicker position. And obviously the Seth Keller transfer worked out. He had a really good year for KU. There was a little bit of a rocky finish to it, which I don't think was all him. Some of the kicks maybe were too low. There were some blocked PATs and blocked kicks down the stretch. But I think if you were ranking the potential of the kickers, like or what they had accomplished coming in before KU, of all the transfers they've added and stuff, this would probably be the top one. And so I thought, Tabor Allen did a decent job this year. He did a good job. He wasn't somebody who could be necessarily a weapon, but he did a good job in what he was asked to do. He wasn't going to go out there and be kicking 45-yard field goals consistently. But I think with Marjan, you get a little bit more of that weapon from the kicker position. At least that'll be the hope for KU. All right, that'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page. See you later this week with LOJ.